Welcome, everybody, to another episode of the AI Rebels podcast. We have Jeffrey with us today. He is here to talk about some of his work he's doing over at his company, StonewrightAI. Jeffrey, why don't you just go ahead, introduce yourself, tell us a little about yourself and what brought you to machine learning and AI.
Thank you. I got into it through being in an engineering business. We were working with mostly like optimizer programs, which were algorithms that were helping my design team turn concepts into production-ready documentation, designs, bills of material. So it was a manufacturing and design team. Also, in addition to these optimizer tools, which were like regression algorithms, we were using, starting in probably the mid-2000s, a lot of things like data from Google, web data, advertising data. And the more I got my hands into the big data on that side, on the marketing end, the more I realized that the things that were coming out of Silicon Valley at that time were the way of the future, the sort of data-driven management. And there was a turning point for me when Google released what they called SMART goals, which was a feature within Google Analytics that a lot of small businesses like mine were using. That was just a really slick machine learning tool for the time. And about that point, I realized that I wanted to go into this stuff, with all my energy. So I'd say within a few years, I was full-time researching and building data science tools. So
wow,
that was, roughly 2019.
Okay. So you have this interesting background in hardware, is that?
Yeah, it was
like
manufacturing.
hardware space. So how has that impacted your view of AI? How has that altered things?
Tremendously. When I was a kid, I grew up in manufacturing environments. I was raised in a family business that was founded in 1932. And so manufacturing was something that I did from a very young age, like working on an electrical test bench and working with all kinds of electromagnetics throughout sort of my teenage years. By the time I was kind of getting through college, I knew I wanted to be in management because that's what my team needed. But at the same time, I had a really heavy dose of everything from CAD to sort of light assembly, test work, pretty nerdy stuff, just like whatever you need to do in a small design manufacturing shop, you did it. But I went ahead and got an MBA, and that was in San Francisco. And that was early 2000s when the Web 2 era really started blowing up. So I started that around the dot-com crash, and the Web 2 era started ramping up. And it was exciting, all the energy coming around, like I mentioned before, this like data-driven management and all these kind of unheard of game theory ideas and heavy stats guys who were talking about kind of operations management. It caught my interest and I ran with it. You guys now are both pretty heavy into the AI scene at this point. I mean, you've been focusing on it hardcore since you started having all these amazing conversations. I'm kind of blown away by all the amazing people that you've had. First of all, I want to give a shout out to my guy, Nick Wheezy.
Hey.
That was a great episode.
What a guy. What a guy.
Yeah.
He's great.
Wheeze.
And Gray, who got me in touch with you. That was in another one.
Oh, Gray's awesome, dude.
Yeah, I want to tell everybody to go back and watch that Thea episode.
Wasn't that amazing?
The research is
she's doing
super
an incredible job.
Incredible job.
Yeah.
And, tell people to go way back and catch Yassine if they haven't seen that one yet. That was a hell of a launch. So congratulations on all this.
Well, thank you. And we're excited to have you on for sure. And you have a very unique background compared to a lot of our guests, where you've had the hardware background, you had the management, you were CEO for about 10 years, I think, right?
Yeah.
So you have this unique background where now you've dedicated yourself to this machine learning aspect. And what where are you at now in that journey with machine learning? Like, what's the status?
It's caught me. It's in my blood now in a big way.
It's not going
I had this
anywhere.
idea where I had a good run as an executive, so kind of prior to being CEO, I felt like responsible for a lot of things in that business, and I loved it. That was my life. And I thought when I was getting into data science that honestly what it was going to happen was that I was just going to learn some new skills, get up to date with this explosive technology that I was excited about, loved working with. But I thought, coding is a kid's game. Honestly, it really, I was never raised to be that kind of a, CS student, or really had that background of putting in long hours, building my GitHub repos, and, that wasn't me. But the more I've done it, the more I love doing it. So eventually I'm going to have to shift out of a hands-on role back into probably a leadership role. We'll see. That'll be great fun too. But right now I'm having a blast. The idea that I've got into was very much related to the hardware. Manufacturers and industrial processors are using a lot of different types of sensor equipment that feeds data from their production lines into different types of control systems. One of the big issues that they have with these control systems, and things that I've seen from working with my clients, have been struggling with data sets that have missing records. Okay, so you can't build a machine learning model on a data set that has NA values or missing values. The nulls just break your analysis. They kill your model. So as I was digging into that, sort of practically solving those problems with a technique that everybody uses called imputation, I started to be kind of having fun tinkering with it, playing with different ideas, rather than using just the imputation libraries that were available to me. I started kind of rolling my own. And at that point, I had this idea to start my next venture, which is called Shrimpute, which is a type of imputation rhythm, which I think is, from my initial tests, has been really high performance. I think it's going to be exciting. It's kind of like a very advanced, overpowered way to impute these values that has much higher accuracy than most other methods, or maybe all.
Is there a story behind the name Shrimpute?
Yeah, it came from this sort of standard recursive hierarchical imputation, which is kind of the code name that I was using for this technique. It's a type of recursive imputation that that's about as much as I like to say about it. But the exciting part of getting in contact with you guys, I'd say about 6 weeks ago, was that I really did want to challenge myself to see what kind of ideas I could come up with in the meantime. And now it's becoming really more of almost a no-code data processing pipeline to sort of take a user's data, clean it up, run it through a number of pre-processing stages that makes the imputation that much stronger before I lay this heavy imputation routine on top of that. And I think at the end of the day, it's going to be integrated with LLM so that we can take advantage of sort of the really big missing ingredient right now with these automated machine learning tools, in my opinion, is the domain expertise of the guy who knows the data better than the software. Right. So I think, with LLM and with some interactivity, we can kind of tease some of that domain knowledge out of the user. And by the end of it, I think we'll be rolling predictive models and hosting predictive models, just, little old me in Detroit going head to head with AWS and Microsoft.
You'll take them down.
That's awesome. It's a really interesting problem space, because I feel like I think that I've heard of a lot of people doing similar things, but most of the ones that I've seen have focused on a very kind of and this is not my specialty. I'm not a data scientist, so it could be that there's something I'm missing. But the ones that I've seen before seem rather shallow, at least in their integration with the language model. Like it seems like it's basically just like, they let the language model infer what type of data it thinks is supposed to be there, and then they run it, right? So it sounds like what you're doing is a bit more involved, right? Where you have, is there more of like a loop and algorithm going on
Ideally,
to,
it's got to be that way. I think
yeah.
that we're on this cusp of people that would use heuristics, kind of hardwired logic routines that were adopted from the past 20 years or more of data
Mhm.
science, where they would say, okay, here's our library of date types, and we're going to apply that to this feature. And once we run a bunch of regex, we're going to figure out exactly which date type this is and solve that. Whereas,
Mhm.
now, yeah, with an LLM, you can run some really basic analysis to say this is definitely a date feature, bounce that to an LLM, and it will say, here's your date format. There are some very clever things where we can start to build these hybrid LLM tools that take advantage of the best of both worlds. Like you
Mhm.
said, that's sort of at the entry level. But I do think beyond that, if we're leaning on the model more to steer a user and to pull more ideas out of the user in terms of, hey, at the end of this, we're going to have a target variable, right? We're going to
Mhm.
have our dependent variable that we're structuring our learning algorithm to solve for. Why don't we start planning for that early in the pipeline?
Mhm.
And the LLM can kind of guide. In fact, I think LLMs can play a real role in automated feature engineering.
Mhm.
So I can unpack that term a little bit.
I was just about to say, let's go over
Yeah,
that just a little bit for
you bet.
those who are not as familiar.
Feature engineering is a technique that advanced machine learning models, these days almost every machine learning model will use, where you existing data that you already have in your data set, but then recombine it in novel ways that weren't present in the original data. Combining features in sort of common ways, like aggregating things by date and giving that its own column. A lot of different other techniques. If somebody were to look up feature engineering, there is sort of this toolkit of feature engineering ideas that guys have become routine, really good at. And you can automate those, from what I've seen, just by some domain information from the user, guiding the LLMs in a really rigorous manner with prompt engineering. I've become a big fan of using XML tagged prompts and taking it in stages where really you'll just lean on the algorithm to solve one small part of the problem, get a quality check. I may even end up running two algorithms sort of competitively, two foundation models, that is, and have them bounce those ideas back and forth so that at the end of that process, you have production ready code that spits back into your app and engineers sort of combines these features in a novel way. That accomplishes what's called data augmentation. Now, like image learning guys think of data augmentation in a very specific way. And doing data augmentation with this kind of tabular data, which is very much where I'm at, is different. It's a lot simpler, to be honest. It's just a lot of combining things. There are techniques that we will get into as well that are more synthetic data generation for like solving imbalances in the data when you have these minority cases that deserve better representation in order to build a stronger model. You can just what's called upsampling, but a lot of those features are quite a deep rabbit hole. And I got to say, that's where my head has been sort of over the past several months. And,
Wow.
we're
So
not.
essentially your vision is, a data beyond the imputation aspect
Oh,
that you're
yeah.
tackling
Yeah.
first. Your vision is a platform for humans to collaborate with language models on fixing and generating data. If I could kind of encapsulate it into a general statement, am I capturing
I
that, or is
think that's
that?
great. I think that's great. I don't know that I've been as heavy on the LLM aspect of it. But I think you're right. I mean, I think essentially that's what we're doing. I don't know that that's going to be compelling to people, in terms of like savvy
The narrative.
guys. Well, yeah, savvy guys, that they've got the tools they like to use. They can just go and latch on to their libraries and impute things the way they do it. I think when it gets really cool is where it becomes kind of a sophisticated, high performance, no code type of application for spreadsheet users.
Yeah. That's what I was just going to ask, Jeff, is who's like the, like, obviously you've been so deep into all these like very complex rabbit holes, but like what the end deliverable, if you could say like, this is the goal for like, who's that target audience? Who's the target user? Is it a specific industry, specific types of companies? Is it individual users?
I think it's good to focus. I really do. I think that I would be doing myself a disservice just to sort of let any missing data opportunity be my market. I'm here based in Detroit. I've got a background in manufacturing and heavy industry. So because they do have issues with missing data, I think I will somewhat latch on to them. But it's going to, sometimes what you want to do and what the market is ready for are very different things. So as we put it out there, if I start getting, good engagement from marketers or financial service people, or, I've had clients in gambling or clients in risk management for insurance, a lot of people are doing cool data science. And, I think as we get to the point where like the MVP is getting circulated and used, I'll have them start to hone in on who's my guy or gal.
Nice. Yeah, that's right.
That's something that's really exciting about the current wave of ML and AIs. I feel like it's finally starting to reach some saturation. I mean, a lot of companies have obviously been working with various initiatives over the last 10 plus years, but I feel like more than ever you see even traditional industry companies starting to invest in these initiatives, whether through developing like their own in-house development team or going and buying some sort of solution. It's an exciting time.
It is a boom. I don't know that we'll ever see one like it again. Certainly I never have previously. And it's something.
Yeah,
it's a lot of
amazing.
So I want to get some feedback from you guys, not about what I'm doing, but about the state of AI. I feel like in your early episodes, there were some, I don't want to say hesitation, but some unresolved ideas about the overall risk of this technology. And so if I had the opportunity, I'd ask you, Jacob, tell me what's changed in the past 3 months in terms of your perception of AI as a risk. And then I'd turn it to Spencer and I'd say, you tell me what's changed in terms of your perception of regulation as a risk.
Those are good questions.
Very interesting. I think overall the risk to me early on, I mean, I've been much less technical, more in the business world, high level, and just been super excited about the potential of this for individuals. AI just makes individual dreams so much more possible, I think, for business. That being said, I was like, oh man, is this going to be a .com bubble? Is this going to go high and tank really fast? But I think more and more I'm realizing that it's becoming, and already was. I think that's what's so unique with AI is like, yes, OpenAI, ChatGPT 3, whatever, like that was pivotal and a huge turning point. Like AI has been being built and like integrated for so long that it's not this big bubble that people think it really is. It's been growing and on the uptrend for years. It's grown very much recently. So overall, I would say the risk now, as I've become more educated, is much lower because I've realized, it's integrated into almost every industry already. It's not like this is a brand new novel thing that has never been used. It's like, no, it's just more advanced, but we've been using it. It's been there.
So
anyway.
As you come to understand that like recommendations are driving so much of the tools that you've been using for the past 10 years, that it's just kind of like, I don't want to stop people from using, predictive algorithms. They're handy.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It's really nice. Yep.
All right. So what do you think? So my perception was that Spencer was a little bit on a different end of the spectrum in terms of, I sensed a bit more concern from him about the regulatory challenges that we're up against. Was that an accurate read?
I'd say so. Yeah.
Okay.
And it's still something that I worry about because it's like, frankly, there are a lot of unresolved copyright. So let me back up slightly. Personally, I think that copyright laws as we know them are dead. And that has not really changed. But obviously the legal system disagrees with me, right? Like there's not been any legislation to change them.
Yeah.
And so I think that there are a couple unsettled questions regarding AI training that are still out there that worry me, with regards to, could this all come crashing down at any moment? And I think that for the most part, I think that we're past that, because initially a lot of my concerns were, like, if say tomorrow, like there's the New York Times case, the lawsuit against OpenAI, right? And I don't expect that to really go anywhere. I'm not a legal expert, but I have read like a lot of cases, a lot of lawsuits and whatnot, because I just in the process of being a nerd, that's what you do.
Right.
And so I'm not all that convinced that they have all that great of a case. We'll see. But originally my concern was like, like tomorrow, like say one of these cases goes through, like could this all come crashing down? But since then I've grown less concerned, for a couple of reasons. First, I think that AI and particularly language models have reached a level of saturation, kind of like I feel like they've reached the critical point already, where there's a lot of good money invested in them. So even if tomorrow the New York Times won their case against OpenAI had to delete GPT-4 and all of their training data, I still think that there is more than enough momentum out there to keep it going.
Yeah.
And then second, the state of synthetic data generation has gotten a lot more optimistic, I think, because at the time I remember going through and reading a lot of the papers, and at that time, like, it seemed like synthetic data generation might end up doing what some people predict of, like, model collapse or whatever. But since then, there's been a lot of really, really promising work on that front, showing that synthetic data generation is the path forward from here, actually. And
I think it's amazing.
It's kind of mind blowing. Like there was that Microsoft paper, and I think that they just trained an embedding model off of synthetic data. I think that's all it was, but it was like state of the art based on purely synthetic data, and that's crazy.
Is that
We interviewed
ultra compressed thing that we're waiting for them to tell us more about? Like
I
the
think
3-bit?
so.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I
I
can't
think
wait.
that
I
was it.
can't wait.
And then a couple, I don't know, like a month ago or so, we interviewed a company, a couple founders from a company called Remix. I don't know if you caught that episode, but pretty
Yes.
much their
Very
entire
cool.
platform is synthetic data generation.
Mm-hmm.
There's so much happening in that space, and like I just I'm no longer nearly as worried about the regulatory risk. But
I'll tell you what, one of my things has been looking exactly at that. There was this team out of MIT that put out a paper in 2019 that had a really big impact on the tabular data guys. We talk synthetic data. We're talking about spitting training data out of an LLM to turn around and fine tune an LLM. But these guys proved, honestly, 2016 was when they published. Somebody named Patke, Wedge, and Vera Machineni, pardon me, out of the Laboratory for Information and Decision Systems at MIT, they put out this paper called the Synthetic Data Vault, where they essentially proved that they could build models of relational databases, learn all the distributions and relationships between all the features.
Wow.
Spit out completely synthetic data. And then they took that and handed it to a bunch of machine learning engineers and measured no difference in the outcome with the completely fake data from the ground truth data.
Wow.
That's part of the inspiration for, why I'm getting heavy into the imputation.
Yes.
It's just because, this feature engineering synthetic data, it doesn't matter if you're into LLMs or tabular stuff. It solves privacy concerns. It stops people from copyright claims. It's cool.
Yeah.
And then there's so much, particularly with imputation. I have to imagine that there is, probably a ton of data sitting on literally, printed out paper in a warehouse somewhere that,
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
At some point is going to get uploaded or is already uploaded, but in desperate need of, repair.
Yeah.
And I think there's, I've seen some people suggest that perhaps the age of big data is over, but I think the exact opposite is happening. I think that, there's all sorts of data that are now so much easier to transform and impute that we didn't really have access to until we had better machine learning tools. It's an incredible flywheel.
Have you gone down the rabbit hole of the automated textbook scanners?
A little bit.
You've seen those machines where they just grind through, I don't know how many, 20 pages a minute or something crazy.
That's wild.
I think about that a lot because, at my old shop, we have textbooks that are completely relevant, full of great electromagnetic theory that was established in the 30s and 40s. All those textbooks, I think, are fair game. And at that shop, I have a library of 10,000 hard copy designs of really good electromagnetic models. And the reason I bring this up is because today, a guy whose name I'm not going to remember, I just linked his stuff on my X feed today. He came out with this new variation of a model that does not require training data. It's the weirdest thing. They figured out how to train the model using physical and geometric constraints. And once they feed it with all these constraints, they don't need to train it in order to get it to generate really interesting physical models. Well,
interesting
simulations of physical models.
Yeah, right.
Digital physical. But we're looking at changes to every aspect of fundamental science that I can see. These models are going to replace every type of simulating that we've been doing.
Oh yeah. I mean, already the leaps and bounds it's making, I keep seeing more and more articles come out. We've talked about this on the show, but the one that comes to mind is where they discovered a new way to create batteries that's X% more efficient just by running this model over and over and over again. And it could iterate through these different, and it literally created a new compound for this battery that was very much more efficient. And that's we're just at the tip of the iceberg. I think of everything that we do and use every day that we just take for granted, but there is just I'm sure there are so many things that can be optimized, and we just have to set the AI loose and please figure out a better way to do this. And it'll try a million different ways in 10 minutes and tell you, it's hard to even grasp that computational power.
Especially when you start thinking about, oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, I was going to say they're running processing on brain organoids, for crying out loud.
Yeah.
I mean, you see these things on your feed and they blow your mind, literally. Just
we're living in the future.
Yeah. Thank God. If I could latch onto those and get a good exchange rate on my processing dollar, I'm there. If it's human brains, if it's rat brains, I don't care. Crunch my numbers, man.
Just get it in there.
I just want to know if I can run Age of Empires 2 on some brain cells and just Install that game directly into my brain. Be
They're
the
weird
culmination
too.
of so many childhood dreams.
Yeah. It's going to be different types of processing for solving different problems.
Yeah.
The technology is going to get so much immeasurably more complex in the next 5 years. One thing that comes to mind is, being in the Bay Area during the dot-com crash, when there was a lot of negative energy around programmers. Why would you want to do any front-end work? Don't get into anything like that. People would tell you, oh, this is a commodity. It's all going to India. Nobody's going to make any money doing this. Learn how to do something practical. God awful bad advice, man. That was such bad advice. As this stuff gets more complicated, it's not going to run smart, engaged people out of business. It's just going to make us, and I'm not in that category, okay? I'm pretty loopy. But the reality is, if you want to build something, we're going to be almost unbounded in terms of sort of what kind of problems we can solve. If anybody out there is on the fence about getting into computer science or learning how to, train or tune algorithms, don't listen to anybody who tells you it's a commodity or that programmers are going away. Those are programmers who do not want you to steal their work.
Yeah, it's a conspiracy.
Literally.
Yeah, exactly. There's a lot to do. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's going to be really interesting to see the way that work changes, because obviously, like, the front end development work of today looks very different from the front end development work of 2002, 2001.
Unreal. Yeah. No, I started with Dreamweaver.
Dreamweaver, yeah.
I remember Dreamweaver, totally.
Garbage. God bless those guys. That was a garbage tool. Macromedia, they made Fireworks was honestly a very cool tool, but Dreamweaver was trash. And then they got into Flash, which we all know what Flash was. But,
yeah.
Sorry, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, like, it's gonna be really interesting to see, 5 years from now, what does the average web dev workflow look like? Because there's still gonna be around, but it's gonna look way different. Because I think, like, there's for a variety of reasons, I think that there's a lot of front end work that is effectively dead. And I don't say that in like a mournful way per se. Like, it's just going to change the nature of the job, and the type of problems that you're solving. And that's something I just want to get on my soapbox here for a second. Like,
please
that's
do.
something that I see all the time, which is people getting, and I am far from the first person to make this observation, but it's just been something that's been annoying me lately. People get really attached to, specific skill sets that they've developed. And it's obviously, it's understandable why, you've put time into developing these, but they don't take the moment to step back and say, okay, what am I actually really doing here? Right. Like, so for me, like with like coding, I'm not actually like that into coding in of itself. I think it's fun. I think it's interesting. I really like doing it, but more than anything, what I like about coding is like the ability to build something or solve a problem really effectively. Like that's magical to me. And I think that that's the kind of mindset that people have to bring to the AI age, right? Like, our workflows are going to become more diverse. We're going to our work roles are going to become more diverse in regards to like what we do. Like, that's how this technology works. And it's, if you embrace it, like, there's a lot of power there for you. And despite what people might think, like, we're still so early. We're still so early.
Ridiculous.
Every single day, I swear I see another post on LinkedIn of like, I ended up trying ChatGPT for the first time. And that's on LinkedIn, where it's like there's already a ton of influencers who have, latched onto it and like are posting 15 threads a week of the 10 best prompts to do X, right? Like,
yeah.
Like, we're so early. We're so early, guys.
Don't find me on LinkedIn, by the way. I don't want to be there. But we're going to not only have to sort of constantly be engaging creative new ways to do what we were doing, but I think one of the most powerful lessons for me personally, it probably came from Jeremy Howard or somebody in one of his Fast AI courses. Like, he had some guest on who was talking about sort of like, how do you get your venture started in a meaningful way? I took the easy part of their advice. I still haven't taken the hard part, but I'll tell you the easy part is figure out something that you want to solve for yourself. Scene did it. Lots of people have been doing it. If you can figure out some little thing that is going to make you happy and going to make your life a little bit easier, make your workflow more fun, do that, because God knows where the market's going to be. That CTO from Microsoft, I think last week, came out and said, well, if you're not sure where things are headed, just do something hard. It's like, good. I mean, I am in that boat. What I'm doing is way beyond my skill level, and I'm going to keep on doing it. But if, on the off chance that there's not a market for it, it's hard to figure out what people want to spend money on. And I'm not going to look to give anything away. It's just I work too hard to build it right now.
Mm-hmm.
But open source people get at me because I want to learn more. The reality is, if it ends up being a tool for me, I'm happy, because it'll be an amazing tool for me. If it ends up being something that you can throw out there in the most simple way imaginable with like a Gradio app, let people play with it. Maybe you've got something. We'll find out with mine, and I'm sure that if that one doesn't stick, there's going to be some other idea that will. And same for anybody. Same for you, Jacob. I know you're going to start building.
Yeah, I want to start building. Building something.
It's going to happen.
Yeah, we have an idea that he and I have been kicking around for a bit that he came up with. Won't give away too many details.
All right.
Top secret.
It's in the fall.
Good.
Yeah. No, we've got some ideas that we've been planning. I've just been swamped with my own work.
For real.
Life.
Yeah.
And I think something you both emphasized that I'm taking the soapbox and jumping on it now, but like AI, its main, the greatest use of AI is to amplify what you want, what you're doing, and what you want to do. Like, think about, Spencer emphasized that like what he enjoys coding, but it's more a means to the end of solving these problems. And like, okay, so I want to solve these problems. I want to solve more of those. That's where I get that high. Let me use AI to help efficiently code, and I'm able to like solve more of those problems. And so it's like you almost get that excitement, that high more and more and more, because you're able to use AI to help bridge that gap. For me, in the accounting industry, it's very similar. I enjoy solving those problems, like identifying like, oh, why is this different? Figure out what's there. And that's what I'm trying to think through. Like, how can I build a tool that helps me do that more? So AI, it really is just that companion you always wanted to help you do what you want to do. It amplifies your reach. It amplifies your abilities. And I think anyone who says it's just going to replace everybody, I think is just so off, because there's nothing there. I don't know. Nothing supports that right now, so.
I don't believe that scaling is going to get them to the point where they have this magically reasoning brain in a box. I don't have confidence that that's what we're looking forward to. I think that new models and new approaches are going to change the game, and it's going to be very different in a few years from what we've been playing with recently. I'm confident of that. But I don't think this talk about like super intelligence and wiping everybody's job off the planet and, sign up for UBI now. A lot of that stuff I genuinely don't want to get on a soapbox about. It's not that type of program. But you can kind of guess where my head is. If somebody has a mindset like yours, where you honestly enjoy solving problems, you didn't go into accounting because it satisfied your desire to be an accountant.
Right.
It's not some unrealized passion that you grew up dreaming about.
Like, oh, wow, I just love it.
And,
yeah, no.
I'm sorry to people who feel differently, but for most of us, that's not our work life. This fantasy that a lot of people like to talk about in terms of like, what color is your parachute, man? Dude, my parachute's going to work. My parachute is I get a paycheck for solving problems. And if I spend a lot of time putting my energy into that, I will get out of it much more than what I put into it. And I'll start having fun because I'll find those little creative things. I'll find ways to be innovative. I'll play games with my teammates. We'll find ways to make the work like extremely fun, even if it is working in an engineering business in a low rent industrial park in, industrial suburban Detroit.
Yeah, right. Right.
It's you will get out of your career the energy that you put into it, I think, in most cases. And it almost doesn't matter if you're working at a meat counter or you're working as doing advanced research for Sam Altman.
Right.
That's a rant.
No, I agree, and I think that the thing that I keep coming back to with AI, with regards to people's fulfillment in their careers and whatnot, is I think that people are underestimating how nice it's going to be when we all have. I'm going to engage in some hyperbole here because that's always fun. When we all have a little buddy installed into our head that like we can instantly access the information that we need at any time, right?
Yeah.
I think that people are underestimating how powerful the to borrow kind of the sci-fi approach of like the merge is going to be. I think in many ways we've already kind of hit a singularity of sorts. Like we can't go back to a phoneless world. We could, but like there's so much that we've already wrapped up into our digital lives that AI, I think, in a lot of ways is what we were missing in order to manage the digital side of our lives. So
people can go back. People can check out. People can go and disconnect, and God bless them. But society is definitely not. I mean,
right, exactly. Yeah, like we're locked in.
We are on this ride. So
we're on the tracks.
I'm not going to let the people in Dubai take the wheel. I'm not going to let the people in Shanghai take the wheel. I don't even want the people in Toronto running the ship. Okay, I want to be building stuff that if people are talking about, well, I don't trust an AI agent to help train my kid, help indoctrinate my kid. I said, well, if you had training data that you felt good about, and if you had an easy way to fine tune an open source model that was like legitimately aligned, not with somebody else's alignment plans, but with your own personal plans, what an incredible tool that would be for raising a kid. Like anything that you're doing around your house or in your life, work life, personal life. I think there are going to be a ridiculous number of exciting changes coming here shortly.
And that's where I think people underestimate the importance of those data sets, and which is a lot of what you're working on. But like that, the example of having a tutor for your child, like or another example in the business world that there's been multiple cases of is where someone in their hiring process sets a AI loose to help select viable candidates based on high performing candidates in their business. Yeah. And oftentimes that itself incorporates so many biases that potentially they're trying to get away from. Like, yes, this like super red personality who just like rolls over people has been successful, but like, is that what you want in your workplace? Like, no, like you want a more well-rounded.
No, yes,
I mean, wait, yes, no.
That's my guy.
Exactly. So that data is so key, and there's still a lot of work going on in that realm of how to modify in effective, meaningful ways that data that is actually in line with your desires. Because when you're working with millions and millions of rows of data, it's very difficult to know, okay, if I plug this in, what's going to happen? So I'm very interested in what's going on there.
I am too. No, there's like the old story about there's 3 people that are involved in every candidate. There's like the guy that shows up in his application. There's the guy that shows up in his interview, and then there's the guy who shows up on day one. And if you have good, good high dimensional data that helps you understand what type of person is going to fit into your team. As a small team guy, I learned early I could not bring people from Fortune 500 into my team. They felt like they were going to pasture. They were trained with a lot of infrastructure that they needed in order to sort of stay on the straight and narrow. if there were ways to game the system, they were going to game the system because that's kind of the culture that they were in. And having AIs to solve that type of very mysterious sort of culture fit, amazing.
That'd be amazing.
Using AIs to get rid of a lot of jobs, though, terrifies people.
Big time.
If the economy changes too quickly, I don't worry about people's ability to adapt to the economy. I don't think that that's the frightening thing. I think the bigger wild card from my point of view is just, will there be side effects of this kind of destabilization that we won't know how that'll play out kind of on a social level? Like, will things start getting really unpredictable, and we'll lose a lot of trust in kind of institutions. And hopefully there are things that we can do to kind of shore up institutions and make people feel better about kind of the sort of transparency and trust that I'm confident that AIs can help us have.
Yeah.
Those are not that's not my area.
But it's a fascinating one.
Yeah.
Jeff, I'm curious, for those, we always like to ask this towards the end of the show, just what advice, words of wisdom, whatever you want to share, what would you share with someone who's interested in AI, has these concerns we've been talking about and more, who's not technical? Think my grandma, my mom, who's like, oh, wow, this is interesting. I'm seeing this in the news. What is going on? How can I maybe use this? What advice would you give to that population?
I think repetition is really the only way to get comfortable with it, and that it's not a steep learning curve. I think it's a very accessible, almost impossibly easy thing to chat if you have any kind of digital experience whatsoever. It's easier than email.
Yeah.
But, I think that this came up the other day with a friend of mine who was asking whether he should go back and get a degree in engineering. And this is a guy in like his late 20s. And, from where I sit, I don't care what you do in your late 20s, man. You can do whatever you want.
So much time.
You've got so much time. It's a joke. But, the same rule I think applies to a lot of people, which is if you're going to let age be a factor in what you're doing, I think you're going to really paint yourself into a corner. You're going to get older, and you're going to feel this increasing pressure to, I've got to put down roots. I've got to stay on this track. This is who I am. I have to, be consistent. No, you don't. Not when the world's changing like it is right now. No, you do whatever you want. And if there are people that are motivated, I think, to explore these kind of technical problem solving that I think you are, and I know that I was. Yeah, I was an HTML, CSS guy. I was not a programmer at all prior to 2019. The programming that I had done was kind of like really esoteric stuff using these sort of multi-physics simulation tools. Nothing that resembles good structured software engineering. And learning how to do that at my age has not been a joke. It's been awesome. It's been a lot of hard work. And I tell you what, doing it with an LLM versus the few years that I was doing it previously without, where I was like in data camp and taking online courses from everywhere I could and really trying to grind through the stuff, man, my life got so much easier as far as learning. There's really no limit to the type of technology that I can dive in and try to figure out. So it's a great time for anybody of any age, honestly.
That echoes a lot of what we've heard. So as we wrap up here, Jeffrey, first, thank you again for coming on and sharing your experience and thoughts. If our viewers want to follow you, follow what you're up to, what's the best place to do that?
It's on X. It's StonewrightAI.
Awesome.
So StonewrightAI. And healthy dose of very low grade banter and occasionally some stuff about, interesting developments in the industry. So
Awesome.
Yeah, please do look me up. And thank you guys again. I love what you're doing and keep it up. Really, it's very fun.
You too. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Jeff. Yeah,
Yeah.
you too.
Thanks. Bye.
Yeah.